Good morning, kids. Today we're checking out a brand new video from a channel called Curious Archive, and he is going to be talking about games that make you feel as though you are a part of the complete ecosystem. Let's hop in and see which games he's going to talk about.
There are two moments in Planet of Lana that made me realize I was playing something special. The first was, literally, a big moment. The camera pulled back and an unfathomably large creature swam under my boat. Its body seemed to keep going, and there was a sense I'd surely be capsized and eaten, but instead it simply passed on, leaving me with an overwhelming feeling that I wasn't the center of this world. The second moment was small. I misjudged a jump and a predator caught me. Okay, time to try again. After respawning, I decided to outrun the enemy, since that's usually something you can do in video games.
Nope.
I didn't even get close. It's rare that a game makes you feel truly unimportant, like you're just a tiny part of a much larger environment. When a title successfully instills this feeling, it can be like witnessing a sort of magic trick. So what I'd like to do today is take you backstage and explore how different games succeed in making you part of their ecosystems.
This is kind of cool.
Okay, so how do you get past a predator in Planet of Lana? The answer is you have to move slowly, learning the route of an enemy, be they biological or mechanical, and finding a way to evade them altogether. From very early on, this title establishes that you're much too insignificant to overcome dangers directly. Instead, Planet of Lana is a game all about understanding the ecosystem, knowing how different threats operate, and putting that knowledge into practice to escape creatures much higher up the food chain than you are. The character you play as is not particularly skillful. Your fastest running speed is a leisurely jog. Your jump is barely enough to cross most gaps. You fall and stumble down cliffs most video game characters wouldn't even be remotely bothered by. And unfortunately, the land itself feels hostile. Eyes peer out from the darkness of most environments. And with no health bar, you're always one wrong move away from game over. But if you pay attention, you realize the game is constantly teaching you about how its ecosystem works. Early in Planet of Lana, there's a part where a tiny creature scuttles under a rock as you wander by. Later, you pass a giant rock, and it lumbers after you on hundreds of tiny feet. The game is full of these little moments of internal consistency, and once you learn the rules of how the environment functions, the path forward becomes clear. But what about a game where you experience an ecosystem not as
I feel like I've seen this game somewhere before, but I have almost no memory of it.
Human, but is something a bit smaller. Introducing Webbed, a physics-based platformer where you play as a peacock spider. Moving around in Webbed is quite difficult. At least for me, I found my first attempts at traversal wildly messy. Instead of gracefully swinging on webs, my spider careened around at high speeds, crashing repeatedly into the foliage. My initial attempt at spinning a fly-catching web was equally sad, yielding a crummy, asymmetrical disaster that was utterly ineffective. And this was a real problem, because in the virtual ecosystem of Webbed, nearly every insect is larger than you are. And the ultimate goal of the game is to rescue your mate from a relatively titanic bowerbird, a task that seemed downright impossible at the start. But to succeed in the environment of Webbed, you can't think like a human. You have to think like a spider. Once I got used to having a body light as air, I began to swing around with much greater success. With practice, I even managed to pull off some rather fancy movement techniques. My fly-catching webs also improved. At first, my few meager strands only ensnared a meal on rare occasions, but the more I crafted wider networks closer in design to those of real-world spiders, the more I found my food came to me. One of the most impressive aspects of Webbed is how game mechanics come together with its virtual ecosystem to make you inhabit a perspective you otherwise might never consider.
Okay, I do kind of like how every now and then you just put like one of your one set of arms up and go, yay! That is so cute.
Granted, Webbed is not trying to perfectly simulate the experience of being a spider. Spiders generally can't fire off a never-ending barrage of webs like they're Spider-Man. They also can't do sick tricks on a skateboard,
What the?
which is something you can eventually unlock. But the core gameplay
okay.
truly does excel at making you feel like you're part of an ecosystem. Another game that can successfully hijack your mind is Gibbon Beyond the Trees. In this game, you live the fast-paced, high-stakes life of a gibbon swinging full tilt through the rainforest canopy. Like in
Nice.
Webbed, your method of traversal is unintuitive at first, but with practice, it starts to feel unbelievably natural, with every movement a glorious expression of momentum. There's a certain feeling you get when you perfectly sync up with your fellow ape, releasing at just the right moment for an
Damn.
incredible rush of speed. It feels astonishingly good to grab a vine and hold it for a long swing, letting go at the very top and gaining tremendous height. Though the ecosystem itself is less interactive than some of the others in this video, it's still deeply
I
immersive,
love
with
this.
other animals finding their own path through the branches, and the weather changing at unexpected times. Gibbon's sense of spontaneity is bolstered by the game's use of procedural animation, or animation that responds dynamically to an environment, instead of following a predetermined loop. It's the same animation
Oh.
method that makes the creatures of Rain World feel so unpredictable. Since I've already covered Rain World in detail elsewhere on the channel, I won't say too much about its simulated ecosystem, but it's another example of a game that can be so mechanically immersive, it changes your perspective as you play it, making you think and react like a prey animal living in an environment that isn't centered around you.
Nice.
Gibbon, similarly, has these moments that convey your character's utter insignificance. There are places where the camera zooms all the way out to capture an incredible leap across an immense chasm. Part of what makes these moments so breathtaking is the knowledge that you aren't watching some predetermined animation. If you make a single mistake, you will absolutely fall. If you stop thinking with your
incredible.
gibbon brain and miss a branch, you'll come crashing to the force below, which isn't such a big deal if you're close to the ground, but definitely is in the high canopy. The effect is a
Yeah.
world that is not only expansive, but
Probably would
indifferent
kill
to the
ya.
player in a way that makes the environment feel all the vaster. Planet of Lana has its own share of zoom-out moments that let you soak in the sheer scale of the world around you. But unlike in Gibbon, it's not just the environments that are
Whoa.
massive, but the
Mega
entities
ribs.
that inhabit them. Amidst a graveyard of giant fractured skeletons, you can find, in the gloom of a cave, the many glowing eyes of a monstrous, spider-like entity who towers over you
Oh,
to such an
heck
extent
no.
it seems unfair. Some mechanical entities stand even taller, and while for much of the game the largest units appear only in the background, there are some sequences where you get up close with these machines that are just spellbinding. Rarely have I felt less significant to a game's world than I
So
did
big.
during these sections. But the most stupefying expression of scale
Oh,
in
look at
Planet
that.
of Lana doesn't involve robots or giant monsters. Instead, it's a relatively quiet moment where your character runs through an empty expanse with their animal companion. The camera starts pulling back, revealing the stars overhead. You watch as your character
Whoa.
appears to grow smaller and smaller, and you think surely the perspective can't get any wider, but the zoom out just keeps going. You
keeps
become
on
nothing
going.
but a tiny dot in the corner of the screen, and still the frame isn't done expanding as the sun starts to peak over the horizon. I timed it, and it takes
Beautiful.
almost 3 real-world minutes for the sequence to conclude, but I absolutely could not have told you this number while playing, because while I watched the sun rise over the distant mountains, time just sort of lost all meaning. The rest of the world faded away, leaving
I
only
can agree with
myself
that.
and the infinite vastness of the cosmos above. Though there are other parts of Planet of Lana that are technically more bombastic and cinematic, it's this section that made me truly feel like a small part of something much greater.
Yeah, that's incredible. Hold on, folks. We'll be right back. And we're back.
I've gotten a
Skyrim.
similar feeling of smallness while playing open world games, sometimes due to the density of their worlds, and sometimes due to the sheer scope. Many modern
Okay, that was
titles can
impressive.
instill a sense of insignificance simply from how long it takes to cross their map. But where most open world games differ from the indie titles mentioned so far is that while the player is typically a minute part of the environment, they can often change the ecosystem around them to a more
Drastically,
significant
yeah.
degree. This can cause players to feel above an ecosystem rather than part of it, but it can also pull them in deeper. In one open world in particular I found myself immersed in was Hyrule from The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild. The land of Hyrule isn't just varied or simply big, but also a world that requires you to understand and
bridge.
interact with its systems to progress. As you play, you learn to chop down trees to cross gaps, and to cook meals. You find ways to overcome the freezing cold of the tundra and the blistering heat of the desert. A lot of people have already talked about how immersive this world feels, and I certainly agree, but I think I felt even closer to the world when I played Tears of the Kingdom. A direct sequel to Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom takes you back to the same Hyrule, and yet I found myself more immersed in the cel-shaded environments than I ever had been in the game's predecessor. A big reason for this difference is Fuse, a super bizarre new mechanic that lets you merge practically anything in the environment with whatever's in your hand. It's an ability that made me think more about the world around me without even realizing it. Because most objects in the world now had a special utility that only Fuse could bring out, I found myself engaging more with the virtual ecosystem around me. I explored each section of the world more thoroughly. I started to know different types of berries by sight alone. I learned more about all the different elemental interactions the game's physics system makes possible. The simple act of experimenting with different in-game systems became one of my favorite activities. I also found myself seeking out different enemy types just to discover what sort of fused materials I could obtain. My curiosity was further encouraged by the greater variety of creatures in Tears of the Kingdom, which exhibit a wider array of emergent behaviors that makes the ecosystem feel more unpredictable. I felt like the game was rewarding me for learning how its world functioned, pushing me to discover all its hidden networks. There's another blockier open-world game that rewards you for intimate knowledge of its ecosystem. Like Zelda, Minecraft balances huge, lonely environments with deep systems of learnable interactivity. While much of Minecraft has to do with mining, it's also very much a game about knowing what plants are edible, what types of animals respond positively to what types of crops, what can be turned into your ally, and what sees you as food. It might not immediately strike you as a game that makes you part of its ecosystem, but personally, when I'm in the early stages of a playthrough and I hear the vocalizations of giant spiders, my brain is still conditioned to go on alert like a prey animal. Knowing things about the world like don't get too close to the weird green guy, or don't look the lanky fellow directly in the eyes are absolutely key to survival. Minecraft also puts emphasis on different biomes, encouraging the player to learn what can be found in which type of environment as they navigate a near-infinite landscape. Tears of the Kingdom...
By hunt, I didn't mean hunt down like to kill, I mean hunt down to find.
Similarly incentivizes knowledge of different environments, retaining not just the different biomes present in Breath of the Wild, but adding 2 all-new ecosystems that feel radically different from one another. The game is essentially 3 worlds stacked on top of each other. The bright sunny islands in the sky, the vast and varied surface world, and the dark and eerie depths below. Even more than different Minecraft biomes, all of these ecosystems have their own rules, and their own aesthetics that reinforce those rules. The depths are meant to be this hostile, lost realm of foreboding flora and fauna, which is why I thought it was clever that the plants here seem to take inspiration from prehistoric species. Even the insects down here look more like something from the Cambrian era, and what you find in each realm encourages you to explore the others. The Sundelion flowers of the Sky Islands give you resistance to the depths. Likewise, the bright bloom seeds you find in caves in the sky and on the surface are absolutely critical for lighting your way when you explore the dark underground.
Damn, that's beautiful.
And while exploring the depths, you'll find powerful fuse materials that make you feel more equipped to take on challenges in the other 2 realms. Minecraft has its own parallel realm in the Nether, a fiery dimension filled with creatures and biomes completely different from the overworld. As is the case in Zelda, if you aren't careful, the different rules of this domain can catch you off guard and lead to disaster.
Never walk
There are other open-world games that succeed in making you feel like the underdog. Horizon Zero Dawn with its artificial ecosystem of towering machines, and Subnautica with its thalassophobia-inducing ecosystem of undersea nightmares both fit this category nicely. As was the case with Rain World, I've already covered these virtual ecosystems in detail, but if you want to feel like a very minute part of a large food chain, they would be among my top recommendations. It's also worth noting that as you progress through both Minecraft and Zelda, you might start to feel less and less beholden to the food chain as your abilities grow. Indeed, there's an argument to be made that...
it just makes sense. In the beginning, you maybe have a wooden sword. By the end of it, you could have a netherite sword that's been enchanted to the max and has literally become the perfect weapon.
You're not really part of these ecosystems, but conquering them. It's a feeling that can arise as you near the end of a lot of open-world titles. But even in the late stages of Minecraft and Zelda, there's no way to fully disconnect from the world around you. No matter your experience level, you can pretty much always be caught off guard by something in the environment. As games with a significant amount of player freedom, how much you disrupt the digital ecosystems of Minecraft and Zelda is ultimately up to you. In the end, the option to keep the land around you green and unspoiled is always available.
Oop. Hold on folks, we'll be right back. And we're back.
Life in an undamaged ecosystem is not an option in the game Endling. Endling didn't begin the way I expected. Based on screenshots, I thought it was a relatively innocent game about a family of foxes. But when I booted it up, I was greeted by these two dark shapes floating against a red background. The camera pulled out and I realized those were embryos in a mother fox's womb, and the world outside was on fire. Almost immediately, I found myself inhabiting the perspective of the mother fox I controlled, reduced to the single instinct of moving forwards. A burning deer sent me hurtling off a ledge. Still, I pressed onwards, limping through the smoke and the rain. At last, I made it to shelter, and as a scene played of the mother having her cubs, I took what felt like my first breath since pressing start. But the scene wasn't over, because then the camera panned up out of the den to remind me what kind of a world these cubs had been brought into. Endling is a game that traps you within its setting. Ingeniously, from here, the gameplay changes into a stressful cycle of finding food for your cubs before the night ends. To reflect this new format, the raging inferno is replaced with desolate snowfall. Tracking down food in this barren ecosystem is a constant challenge, and to make things more challenging, before long, your cubs start coming with you to learn how to hunt. Trying to remain alive while also protecting your pups requires constant vigilance, pulling you further into the world. Though technically post-apocalyptic, Endling depicts a future...
looking by this downhill, looks like one cub was already lost. Damn!
Much closer in time than most works of sci-fi, one ravaged by the mistakes of humanity. As a game rooted in the perspective of a fox, no dialogue communicates its themes of environmental degradation. Instead, the devastation is felt in the bareness of the ecosystem itself and the decaying remnants that make up the landscape. Humans themselves are rare, their gas mask making them feel alien, and helping you think of them as threats the same way the fox does. To drag you further into the psyche of an animal, one of your cubs is carried off early in the game by a human survivor. But though the game teaches you that the world of humanity is best avoided, as food becomes scarce, you find yourself taking greater and greater risks just to keep your cubs
technically kidnapped
alive. This all came to a head for me when one night, starving from lack of things to hunt, I allowed my cubs to feed on noxious-looking garbage, not knowing if it was toxic. It's a moment that wouldn't be nearly as powerful if I hadn't been forced to make that choice myself due to the ecosystem scarcity. The later stages of Gibbon use in-game systems to convey ecological devastation in a similar manner. After a while, you start seeing plumes of smoke and clear-cut groves in the background. Swinging itself begins to feel different as the number of trees decline. Eventually, a full-scale fire breaks out, sending the forest ecosystem into a panic. Missing a branch holds new weight, as falling into the forest below now means succumbing to the inferno. Crossing large gaps are now key for survival, turning what was once a joyous expression of freedom into a grim necessity. Even later, the natural forests give way to rows of monoculture crops that are difficult to swing through, which then transition into urban areas. Here again, Gibbon doesn't need dialogue to convey its themes. The simple mechanical awkwardness of trying to navigate rooftops instead of the branches you're accustomed to says more than a direct statement on environmental destruction potentially could have.
Ooh, damn, what was that?
Maybe it should be no surprise that games that make you part of an ecosystem can get you to think more about the world around you. After all, humans are already part of an ecosystem,
that's what it is.
even if it doesn't always feel that way in our daily lives. Though we are a relatively insignificant part of Earth's history on a cosmic scale, we have the capacity to profoundly influence our environment in the present. And after playing through some of these games, I can't help but wonder what kind of ending we're headed towards. If there's an ecosystem-focused game with a more hopeful, if bittersweet conclusion, I'd say it's probably Planet of Lana. It's a game that exposes you to constant imagery of the mechanical interrupting the natural world, and yet it's also very much a story about how you can learn from the mistakes of the past to create a better tomorrow. As you progress through the game, educating yourself on the ins and outs of the environment, you gain a tremendous appreciation for the world around you, all without a single sentence of dialogue spoken. And while I won't spoil the final moments, I will say the ending stayed with me long after the credits rolled. Ultimately, there's no single way to create an effective ecosystem-based game. Across many different genres and art styles, game studios have made a startling variety of worlds ruled by interactive systems. And there's plenty of games with unique fictional ecosystems that I wasn't able to cover here. If you're interested in virtual ecosystems, I've got the full list of games featured in this video down below. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this entry, please lend your support by liking, subscribing, and hitting the notification icon to stay up to date on all things curious. See you in the next video.
Well, folks, that's going to be the end of today's episode. I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link will be in the description below. And I'll see all of you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.